Out of all the characters we meet in Chainsaw Man Part 1, there's perhaps no more device character than Makima, the main antagonist of Part 1's story. Either you're someone who loves her character, or you're someone who absolutely detests her character. There's really no in between when it comes to Makima. However, with Makima being such a controversial character, it can be easy to overlook the good aspects of her, which is why in today's video, I want to take the time to explain why Makima is the undisputed best antagonist for the new generation of Shonen Jump. And as someone who absolutely loves Sukuna from Jujutsu Kaisen, I do not make this claim lightly at all, and it's my hope by the end of this video, you not only feel the same, but you also walk away curious enough about Makima's character that you can check out my The Beautiful Evil of Makima video. But cheap plug aside, let's take a look at exactly why Makima is the best antagonist of this new generation of Shonen Jump. In order to understand her impact on the series and how she ultimately put Denji through a nightmarish hell, we have to look at what made Makima into the person that people either love or they hate. At an early age, Makima was discovered by the Japanese government and raised by the government, which in hindsight, trying to control the literal control devil probably isn't a good idea. However, as one would expect by a being who's raised by the government and those government officials, it resulted in Makima being a rather ruthless and cold and calculated person, to a point she had no qualms setting up a heartless plan to break Denji by giving him the very things he's always wanted, just to rip them away in order to psychologically break him to meet her own selfish goals. This is both a great example of the debate of nature versus nurture, and what happens when someone is brought up through their critical development years without two key ingredients that the soul needs to flourish, which are love and compassion. And what we see from Makima is that after you strip away all the various foul misdeeds that she did, and make no mistake, Makima's done a lot of foul stuff. Makima at the end of the day is someone yearning for that true connection, and in particular that connection that comes from being loved by a family and having that sense of belonging that a family provides. Since the early days of mankind, we've always been creatures who sought out others. We were never truly meant to be alone, which is why when people are alone for long periods of time, in quite a few cases, it causes chemical imbalances that occur inside of the brain, which cause depression, because we are hardwired to want a place of belonging that we can call our own. We seek out partners to pass on our genes to the next generation, but also so that we can create our own families. And throughout the history of mankind, when people have been alone, they've traditionally fared worse. Hence the creation of packs and clans, and why the term lone wolf has a negative connotation to it, which, given Makima's upbringing, even though she was in a position where there were several devil hunters who answered to her, she never truly had a place of belonging and was empty on the inside of the very thing that she was seeking to have fill her up. The proof of this can be found when we look at the approach that was taken with Makima's reincarnation, Nayuta. She's the sweet little girl who Denji was given at the end of Chainsaw Man Part 1 to raise and to keep out the hands of the Japanese government. While we've seen glimpses in Chainsaw Man Part 2 that she still has some traits of Makima, after all, she's still the control devil. Nayuta has a layer of innocence about her that we never saw from Makima, and that's because of how she was being raised by Denji. She has had the opposite upbringing of Makima, which is exactly what Kishibe wanted when he gave Denji Nayuta. One was being raised to be controlled and being used to control others, basically a living weapon, and the other is being raised filled with Denji's love and being given the opportunity to experience life as a normal girl, or at least as normal of a girl as one could expect from someone like Nayuta. It's nature versus nurture on full display when we look at how Makima ended up and how Nayuta is being raised. And the distinction is needed so that we can fully explore the tragedy of Makima's character and why all these factors have led to her being the best antagonist in the current generation of Shonen Jump. Makima is a woman with strong ideals, cold calculation, and the patience to wait until the proper opportunity presents itself to set her plans into motion. Regardless as to how much collateral damage there is as a result of it, a few sacrifices can be made, whether they be the deaths of beloved characters at her hands, like when she killed Power, or rather she be indirectly responsible for the death, like the death of Aki Hayakawa, both as a human and as the gun fiend. Her goal was to rip Denji's heart out and drive him into despair, all while hiding her true nature behind that sweet smile and that seductive set of eyes that she stares at him with. Whereas her other antagonist peers in Shonen Jump, particularly the battle shonen, are more more likely to throw down in physical assault and get directly involved to be an obstacle for the hero to overcome, Makima does the opposite for a long time. She hid in plain sight while making it clear from the very beginning that Denji could be viewed as expendable by her, shown when she tells him kill the muscle devil in chapter 2, and Denji's shown conflicted at first because that little girl has a backstory that relates to him, but this is the moment that confirmed for Makima that she could indeed control Denji, at least to an extent, and she would continue looking for more ways to control him as the series progressed. It went from fear to offering food for Denji to offering hope of a relationship with her, because she played the role of both the rake and the ideal lover from The Art of Seduction, a book by Robert Greene, in an attempt to control and ultimately break down Denji. Makima chose not to pick violence right away. It was the last option for her, but she chose to wait in the shadows, hiding in plain sight as someone who Denji thought was a friend, thought could be a lover, and she carefully constructed a life of happiness that Denji was devoid of up until this point. He was given a sense of purpose as a devil hunter. He was given a home and a brother by Aki, and after he got over his initial sexual attraction towards power in the very beginning, once we got to the events after the Darkness Devil, Denji was giving a sister in power where he no longer had sexual feelings towards her. For the first time in his life, Denji had true bonds with someone other than Pochita, and they were growing stronger by the minute as they experienced things, and watching the entire thing from a distance was Makima, gauging the situation and waiting for the right moment to rip it all away from him. But whereas other villains would go right for the juggler through brute force to try and break the main character all at once, Makima knew the best way to break Denji was to slowly begin taking things away from him that he cherished and let Denji actually soak in despair after a series of close calls with beings like the Darkness Devil, which left Denji, Aki, and Power emotionally fragile, and she allowed for them the chance to begin healing from that encounter before plunging the knife into each of them with a level of precision that rivals that of an expert surgeon. This was all because she wanted to sever Denji of his contract with Pochita and felt that Denji did not deserve the Chainsaw Devil Pochita. With Makima, what makes her stand out amongst her contemporaries in Shonen Jump is that she doesn't just kill to kill, even though she has a mean streak inside of her. Most of the time when she kills, it's a sacrifice needed in order to achieve a bigger purpose that she's going for. All lives are mere sources of color that she can use to finish painting the bigger picture that she's working on. This is most likely due to, again, the way that she was brought up by the government. She can rationalize lives in the way that the government can rationalize lives and well-beings of its people, weighing against the greater needs of the country itself. In a lot of ways, her line of thinking's no different than the President of the United States that you see in Chainsaw Man, who offers up a portion of the lifespan of every US citizen to the gun devil is a necessary sacrifice needed for the bigger picture. The only difference between Makima is that she isn't afraid to operate both on a larger scale and a more intimate scale in order to achieve her goals, which make her leading on Aki and Denji just to have Aki killed hit home that much harder, because you see that Makima can detach herself emotionally if it means that's what gets the job done. There's a level of cold calculation to Makima's character. All lives matter, but with Makima it comes down to context and variables of the situation at hand. She might save you from a burning building one day because you might offer her some value to her goal, but the next day, if you're in a hostage situation with, say, the Prime Minister or a high-ranking government official and she can only save one of you, Makima would save the one who offers most value to her at that point in time, and she would not feel bad about it. She was nurtured to take emotion out of her decisions, and it's led to her being what she is, a truly terrifying villain, which is made scarier when you realize that she did not have to end up like this. In another lifetime, in another timeline, she could have ended up like Nayuta. This only further serves to add to the tragedy of Makima, especially when you consider her power of control works by affecting those who she deems to be below her, which is basically every human being of existence. Humans are meant to be a means to end for, especially when it comes to Denji. She does not care about Denji. She never loved Denji. She let him on. Denji was just someone who happened to have a contract with Pochita and was in possession of his heart. That's the only thing that made Denji special to Makima. It's something Denji himself slowly begins to realize before Makima's betrayal takes place, because he rages out at one point in Chainsaw Man Part 1 by asking, why does everyone want Chainsaw Man's heart but nobody wants his Denji heart? By the time Denji realizes that Makima's just like everyone else and does not care about him, it's already too late, and he confirms his suspicions when he sees that Makima didn't even recognize his face during the final battle, therefore confirming she never cared about him. The small details such as this are what truly made Makima as terrifying as she is, because with hindsight, you can see she didn't have to end up the way she did, and yet because of how she was brought up, she became an absolute menace. Again, nature versus nurture. This is driven home even further when you realize that Makima is different from the other devils we see in the series, who are beings that hate humans so deeply to their core. And like Makima, they view humans as being beneath them, but Makima is the most dangerous because it's not because she doesn't just look the most human. It's not because she looks super sexy, but she understands humans on a deeply psychological way. She understands the human heart and what makes it tick, and she does not care if she has to crush someone's humanity or their soul in the process. In fact, it's because she understands the human heart and human nature as well as she does that she's so effective at being a villain. However, what's even more interesting about her is that when we look at her reasoning for wanting Pochita's heart in Chainsaw Man, it's not just to get rid of bad movies like Thor: Love and Thunder or bad television shows like Miss Marvel, but it's also meant to remove things that hold back society. In the past, the Chainsaw Devil consumed the Nazi Devil, the AIDS Devil, the Nuclear Warhead Devil. It made people forget those things even existed. It was a truly frightening power because nobody ever wants to be forgotten. But as Makima listed out the very things that the Chainsaw Devil had consumed, we see it's a power that can be used for the right things as well. For as terrifying as it is, there are redeeming factors for it. Makima talks about using the power of Chainsaw Man to, quote, blot out, end quote, all things that humanity would be happier without. That duality of Makima is what really sets her apart from everyone else in Shonen Jump as a villain. She's a villain and has done some very foul things, but in her mind, she thinks she's doing the right thing, but we as readers or viewers have to question if her goal by herself, if it's actually a bad thing. Eliminating the calamities that plague mankind will lead to more peaceful world. Yet Makima has gone about it in a completely different way. But that goes back to how she was nurtured into a cold and calculating force by government authorities. Yet that again is the beauty of Makima's character. Her ideal is not a bad one, but due to how she was raised, she doesn't truly understand the human experience and what it means to be human. Part of the human experience is both how to know love and joy and experience it, but also how to experience pain, because it is through that stimulation of pain that we as humans are able to evolve, and through that experience we are able to appreciate the time that we have with our loved ones. Makima views these things as being stuff that mankind would be happy without. Yet she doesn't realize that sometimes the tears that we shed, while we might have them stimulated by pain, they are a weight being removed from us with each tear, which allows us to cherish the human experience all the more. Makima can watch all the sad and crappy movies she wants. She can watch the movies in the theater with Denji and shed tears at one point, but at the end of the day, this goes back to Makima being someone who was raised without knowing and experiencing genuine love. Therefore, she does not know the human experience. She's someone who knows the definition of love. You give her a dictionary, she could read you the definition of love. She could probably say it off of memory. She knows the signs of when someone is in love. She knows how to manipulate when she sees those signs in someone like Denji, but she doesn't truly understand the vulnerability that people have when they fall in love. You are giving someone the power to literally destroy your heart from an emotional perspective, because you're letting them in and you're giving them power over you, and love comes with joys as well as heartbreak. Makima is literally the control devil. She holds control over humans. By default, she won't ever know what love is because of the way that she was raised. In fact, the manga even goes as far as to tell us that Makima was only able to make connections with people mostly through fear, and for that reason, giving her the power to selectively erase things by using the Chainsaw Devil would only spell disaster, because she can't see how big of a mistake it is that she's making, and it's due to that lack of love and understanding of what love is that leads to the lack of foresight to see why her plan will rob people of the human experience, and why she, as the manga tells us, is someone who always wanted to form an equal relationship with others. That's the tragic irony of her situation. When Makima is able to see what's behind the door for Denji, the trauma of Denji's past where he killed his father, that would have been a moment where when someone who had known love in the past or had the capacity for love for others would be able to empathize with Denji and form that connection, because that is an integral part of the human experience. But Makima, while she did spend time in that mental space with Denji's past, it could be argued she had about as much focus on it as your girlfriend might have when she's looking at a TikTok video. It's a quick dopamine hit that holds your curiosity for a moment, and then it's on to the next one. While Makima did love Chainsaw Man, something she said by her own admission, it can also be argued that due to her not experiencing love in a meaningful way, only really loved the idea of Chainsaw Man and not Chainsaw Man himself. She's always been in the power position when it comes to relationships. She even talks about wanting to fight and win control over Chainsaw Man, which in of itself, that's not love, that is control, because love is an equal exchange where partners give up vulnerability and some control to one another. Makima was in love with the idea of being in love with Chainsaw Man, which is part of her tragic character flaw and leads to a line of thinking where she says she doesn't care if Chainsaw Man eats her, because if that happens, she at least be with him in some capacity. This is made even sadder when you realize that she was not viewed as a human, which is why Denji is being given the opportunity to raise Nayuta in order to prevent her from turning into another Makima, because the only way to control such a being, such as the control devil, isn't the way that the government did it, but instead is to show a different way, show the human experience, and show what it means to be loved and know love, which is why the control devil being reincarnated without any memories is so important. It's a blank slate to show what Makima could have been like in a different life, and it's meant to elevate Makima's character by extension. Makima, by falling from grace and into the depths of what she did, is needed to pay off for Nayuta hitting home so hard, and through her various actions, she not only broke Denji in Chainsaw Man Part 1, but she set the foundation to make him stronger, all while making the main character raise her reincarnation and prove that it's the point of nature versus nurture being a real thing. Nayuta is not Makima, but for this video, we could look at her as being like a daughter of Makima. Denji is basically raising the child of someone who tormented him, and is tackling the subject of the sins of the parent are paid for by the child, and showing that that expression does not have to be the case at all. Makima might be dead, but her impact as a villain is felt for a very long time, long after she's died, with the small moments we see, like with Nayuta, where she's in the classroom, or she's sleeping with Denji, or she's playing with them in the park. Makima presents a duality that makes you dive into the character on a deeper level and look at how Makima brings up so many elements of the human experience, which ironically she doesn't understand, but is used in order to highlight the human experience. Makima on so many different levels is the one pulling the story along and moving it forward, all to stimulate growth for the main character. And all that gaslighting led to Denji now living a life with her reincarnation that has potential to be the opposite of what she ended up living. And I think that's the true beauty of Makima's character, how her reincarnation is only going to further elevate her by the time we get to the end of the series. That being said, I'm curious to know how you guys feel about the Chainsaw Man character Makima. While you think that over, click here to watch these other Chainsaw Man videos.